I'm not feeling very good about it. That is not a regret. It is an alarm. Because riders do not confess like that unless the season did not just go wrong, it rewired them. Francesco Bagnaia spent 4 years inside Ducati's protected zone, always first or second in the championship, always in the argument, always close enough to believe the bike belonged to him. Then 2025 arrived and he described himself as an outsider, not beaten, displaced. Like the same factory suit still fit his shoulders, but the machine underneath had moved on without him. Here is the problem that makes this episode dangerous. The GP25 was not a bad bike. It was a title weapon. Marc Marquez proved that by clinching the championship with 5 rounds still on the calendar. So when Bagnaia calls 2025 his worst year, the question is not what happened to Ducati. The question is, what happened to Pecco when the bike stopped forgiving his habits? And if a 2-time champion can be made irrelevant inside the best system on the grid, what does that say about 2026 when his contract clock hits 0 and the Sepang test becomes less a reset and more a trial, while Bezzecchi, Acosta, Quartararo, and even Toprak's 2026 arrivals circle the market like opportunists? If this is true, then everything fans believe begins to fall apart. Bagnaia did not lose 2025 in one crash, one bad weekend, or one unlucky tire. He lost it in slow motion, in public, while his teammate turned the same motorcycle into a trophy factory. 2 Grand Prix wins. America and Japan, one of them arrived after Marquez crashed from the lead at Coda, which meant even the victory carried a shadow. And when the title was sealed at Motegi, Bagnaia stood on the other side of the celebration as the teammate he was hired to beat locked the crown with 5 rounds remaining. Then the late season spiral. Malaysia sprint win from pole, then no finishes in the final 5 Grands Prix. Marquez was injured and absent, and still Bagnaia could not turn the calendar into redemption. This is why his quote matters. I'm not feeling very good about it, because I recognize that we could have done more. He did not blame the garage, he blamed his adaptation. That is a rider admitting the war was not lost to speed, but to timing and comprehension. And that admission lands at the worst possible moment, because 2026 is not just a new bike. It is a contract year. It is a factory that runs 4 factory spec bikes and can afford to be ruthless. It is a paddock that watches Ducati pivot in 24 hours when the next era becomes obvious. So the unresolved question driving this episode is simple and brutal. Is 2026 a comeback season, or is it the year Ducati quietly proves Bagnaia is already a past champion? The catalyst is not a rumor. It is the combination of 3 truths that cannot coexist peacefully. Truth 1. Bagnaia is a 2-time champion, built on braking violence, calm entries, and a kind of smoothness that makes the lap time feel inevitable instead of forced. He wins when the bike lets him attack late and stop the world at the apex. Truth 2. In 2025, he admitted the bike never became consistently fast for him. We weren't able to find the balance to be consistently fast. I had more flashes. Flashes are what underdogs live on. Champions live on repeatability. Truth 3. The GP25 clearly had repeatability because Marquez turned it into a title with 5 rounds remaining. When those truths collide, the paddock does what it always does. It stops asking about lap time and starts asking about status, about the internal direction of Ducati's development, about which rider the system is willing to build around when the bike must become one thing, not 2. This is why every quote about feeling in modern MotoGP is not soft talk. Feeling is the interface between rider and prototype. When Bagnaia says he couldn't adapt, he is describing a broken interface. And once that interface breaks, the rest follows. Qualifying becomes a fight. Races become a fight in dirty air. And the one weapon he owned, late braking, becomes dulled by traffic. He explained the technical pain without hiding behind it. Ducati's ride height device regularly troubled him because of how it changed the GP25's behavior. When a bike changes its balance under braking, it changes the moment a rider commits. Bagnaia's strength is commitment. You cannot commit to a motorcycle that is shifting beneath you. The second catalyst is timing. Ducati has insisted no 2027 rider deals will be struck at the team launch. Even that is a signal, because it admits the options exist. And in a market shaped by 2027's equal spec 850cc reset, every contract conversation is not about next season. It is about who you trust to carry you into a new era. So 2026 begins with a rider who feels like an outsider inside a factory that just watched his teammate turn the same bike into dominance. That is not a normal offseason. That is a pressure chamber. The easiest lie fans tell themselves is that Bagnaia's 2025 was just the bike, that the GP25 was strange and Pecco was unlucky, and next year it will click. But Ducati does not worship excuses. Ducati worships evidence. Bagnaia's own language tells you what the evidence looked like. He did not say the GP25 was impossible. He said he could have done more. He said he did not perform as well as he should. He said he could not adapt to the situation as he should have. Those are not the words of a rider trapped by engineering. Those are the words of a rider who knows he lost the argument inside the garage. And once you lose that argument, the politics change. Because the GP25 did not merely expose a weakness, it created a hierarchy. Marquez became the proof of concept. Bagnaia became the exception case. And factories do not build the future around the exception case. This is where the season standings become more than numbers. Bagnaia finished 5th overall. The rider who was supposed to be Ducati's stable crown holder became a distant result behind the sport's new order. And yes, context matters. Marquez sealed the title at Japan, and the points gap was savage. But here is what hurt more. Marquez then disappeared with injury, and Bagnaia still could not turn the last stretch into an identity repair. The world watched the best bike, the best budget, the best garage, and a champion with nothing to lose fail to finish the last 5 Grands Prix. That is not just poor luck. That is a rider whose confidence has collapsed so badly that the limit becomes unreadable. And Bagnaia's most important skill, braking, is the first thing to die when confidence dies. Late braking is not a technique. It is an agreement with risk. It is saying, I will arrive faster than everyone else, and I trust my front tire and my brain to hold the line. But in 2025, Bagnaia kept getting forced into the pack. Qualifying inconsistency dragged him into dirty air, and dirty air kills the front tire's information. The moment the front stops talking, Bagnaia stops stabbing the brake. He brakes earlier, he carries less entry speed, and suddenly his smoothness becomes caution instead of craft. Marquez does not need the same conversation with the front. Marquez can ride on chaos, he can ride on instinct, he can ride on pain. That is why the GP25 could be both a weapon and a trap. It did not need to be gentle, it needed to be lethal. And that leads to the core fracture inside Ducati. 2 riders asking for 2 different kinds of motorcycle. Bagnaia's best Ducati was a bike that let him load the front, brake late, and carve. Marquez's best Ducati is a bike that lets him rotate, rescue when on, and attack, even when the platform is imperfect. When development must choose where to place the knife edge, the rider who survives the knife edge becomes the priority. In 2025, that was Marquez. And now we arrive at the sentence that changes everything. But this is where the entire story snaps. The contradiction is not Bagnaia being slow. The contradiction is Bagnaia being made to feel like an outsider on a factory bike that was proven to be a title-winning system. That means the issue is not speed, it is belonging. It means Bagnaia did not just fail to unlock the GP25. He failed to influence what the GP25 became. And in modern Ducati, influence is everything. The bike moves toward the rider who keeps scoring, while the others keep asking. Bagnaia said the ride height device kept troubling him under braking. That is the kind of detail that tells you development was chasing a platform that changed the bike's behavior dynamically. When that repeatedly harmed your lead breaker, it suggests the factory accepted that harm as an acceptable trade for the overall concept. That is political betrayal without a handshake. Not because Ducati hates Bagnaia, but because Ducati's religion is lap time. And once that betrayal occurs, the rider's psychology ruptures. You stop thinking we are building. You start thinking I am surviving. Survival creates errors, desperation in qualifying, and DNFs that look like incompetence from the outside but feel like drowning inside the helmet. This is why Bagnaia's Malaysia story matters. He mentions the flat tire when he was second and fighting for the win. He points at misfortune, but he does not hide behind it. He knows misfortune does not explain a season. It only explains how painful the season was when even the rare good day got ripped away. The power shift, then, is not about one rider beating another. It is about Ducati learning who can turn chaos into points without needing the motorcycle to be loyal. And that lesson reaches beyond 2026, because 2026 Ducati runs 4 factory-spec motorcycles, 2 in red, 2 factory-supported. That means internal comparison becomes brutal. It means Bagnaia is not just being measured against Marquez, he is being measured against a wider ecosystem of riders on equal spec machinery. The garage becomes a courtroom, and the judge is not sentiment. It is lap time and adaptation speed. Everything you thought you understood stops working here. Fans think Bagnaia's smoothness is untouchable. They think it is the antidote to Marquez's violence. They think Marquez fears that calm precision because it represents a rider who can win without bleeding. But 2025 proved a darker truth. Smoothness is only dominant when the bike is stable enough to let smoothness become aggression. When the bike becomes unstable, smoothness turns into hesitation. And hesitation is the one thing Marquez eats alive. So the advantage flips. Bagnaia's signature becomes a weakness in the wrong environment. Chaos becomes a shield in every environment. And Ducati notices this immediately because factories do not care about style. They care about what style survives when the system changes. This is why the whispers around Bagnaia's future exist even before Sepang. Officially, Bagnaia remains a factory Ducati rider for 2026 alongside Marquez. That is the contract reality. But the paddock does not talk in contracts, it talks in trajectories. And Bagnaia's trajectory in 2025 created a brutal reading. If the bike continues to evolve toward the rider who dominated 2025, then the other rider is not being prepared for 2027. He is being evaluated for survival until 2026 expires. Ducati has already shown it can pivot fast when the next era becomes obvious. Mugello 2024 was the proof. One public refusal, and within 24 hours, the factory rewrote its future. So when people say it's not official, but we know, what they mean is this. They know Ducati has a history of acting like a machine, not a family. And if the machine believes Bagnaia cannot be the spear into 2027, it will begin preparing replacements long before he even throws a leg over the GP26 in Sepang. The Sepang test, then, is not a technical moment. It is a political moment with tires. Because Bagnaia's only way out of this is to do something that is psychologically harder than winning a race. He has to win back ownership of the motorcycle, not by asking, by taking. When a rider loses ownership, every consequence multiplies. Qualifying becomes the first battlefield, because qualifying is where a rider proves the bike belongs to him before the race even begins. Bagnaia's 2025 qualifying struggles were not just bad laps. They were the start of the pack war that killed his braking advantage. If he starts 5th, he rides someone else's air. If he rides someone else's air, he cannot brake at the last meter. If he cannot brake at the last meter, he is no longer Bagnaia. He is just another Ducati in traffic. And this creates the ugliest loop in sport. Your strength depends on a condition you can't access, and the only way to access it is to perform without your strength. This is why 2025 shocked the grid. Not because a champion finished 5th, but because the champion looked trapped inside a system that should have freed him. And the market responds to trapped champions like sharks respond to blood. Aprilia has Bezzecchi rising, with 3 wins in the final 10 rounds of 2025, including Silverstone, Portimao, and Valencia. KTM has Acosta as the generational pressure point. Yamaha has Quartararo collecting poles while feeling betrayed by the project. Everyone is watching the same thing. If Ducati can make its own champion feel disposable, then every seat becomes tradable. Ducati leadership says it will decide later, but indecision is itself leverage. It tells Bagnaia you do not control your own timeline anymore. And there is a second consequence, quieter but more lethal. Bagnaia's public admission that he could have done more is a double-edged blade. It makes him honest. It makes him accountable. It also removes the protective shield of blame. Because now, if 2026 begins and the GP26 still does not fit him, the world will not say Ducati built a bad bike. It will say Bagnaia still cannot adapt. And adaptation is the currency of the 2027 reset era. A rider who cannot adapt to a concept change on the same manufacturer becomes a question mark when the entire sport changes tires and engine formula. The 850cc equal spec era is coming. Michelin exits. Uncertainty becomes the new baseline. This is why 2026 is not about revenge. It is about relevance. And the cruelest part is that Marquez does not need to attack Bagnaia to beat him. Marquez just needs to keep existing as proof that the system works. Every lap Marquez does on the GP26, every time he looks comfortable, every time he smiles in a debrief, it becomes an accusation against the man next to him. And that pressure has a habit of breaking champions faster than any crash. GP24 doesn't cover MotoGP. We document its wars. Subscribe and enlist. Bagnaia's war is not a single season rebound story. It is an intersection of 4 arcs that are about to collide. Toprak's 2026 arrival at Pramac Yamaha is the reminder that 2027 is being treated like a new market, and incumbents get nervous. Ducati's internal fracture is the real engine. Marquez dominated 2025. Bagnaia collapsed on the same machine. That split does not heal with optimism. It heals with a bike concept that either returns Bagnaia's braking weapon or finally accepts that the system only needs one style. Acosta's ascension is the threat hovering above every 2026 decision. A generational rider without a win by Portimao 2025 on a KTM suffering mid-race pace collapse is the kind of talent that will not stay trapped forever. Ducati knows this. Everyone knows this. And Yamaha's existential crisis, with Quartararo's 5 poles and frustration, is the background noise that tells you the grid is full of elite riders who will move the moment they smell a better future. So, Bagnaia enters Sepang with a simple mission: prove that 2025 was not his truth. It was his warning shot. He must rediscover braking strength without waiting for the bike to become kind. He must qualify like a man who is done being dragged into dirty air. He must race like the smoothness is back to being violence, not comfort. Because if he does not, the rumors become reality by momentum, not by announcement. Ducati can insist no 2027 deals will be struck at a launch. But a factory does not need to sign a contract to make a decision. It only needs to stop building the bike around you. And now the part nobody is ready for. The 2027 reset is not a fresh start for everyone. It is a trap for riders who arrive at the new era with a broken relationship to their current machine. If Bagnaia spends 2026 still fighting to understand Ducati's direction, how does he lead a project into a new engine formula and a new tire reality? If Ducati believes Marquez is the only rider who can weaponize instability, why would it bet its 2027 future on anyone else? And if Bagnaia cannot reclaim ownership in 2026, what happens when the paddock's whispers stop being whispers and become the obvious next move? Those are not dramatic questions. They are the only questions that matter, because the bike does not care how many titles you have. The bike only cares what you can do with the next version. And Ducati has already shown what it does when the next version belongs to someone else. GP24 doesn't cover MotoGP. We document its wars. Subscribe and enlist.